The Honorable, the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, House Chairperson, honorable members, visitors in the gallery, Bakhaitsu, Dumela. On Sunday, we will remember the lives of the 44 South Africans who died in August 2012. For 3 years, the families of those who died waited for the Marikana Commission of Inquiry report to be released in the hope that it would provide answers and closure. It provided neither. In fact, the failure of the president to assign political responsibility for the massacre is indefensible. Not a single member of the executive or the South African Police Service has been held to account for the loss of life. In fact, it should rightly be with this government, the ANC government. The Minister of Police came here earlier on and justified it by simply saying accountability never took place during apartheid, why should it take place now? Minister of Police, surely the standards cannot be apartheid. We are reducing our society to the worst evil that has occurred in our nation. But of greater insult to the victims is that the report concluded that, in terms of reference, precluded it from making recommendations regarding compensation. Instead of taking a decisive stance in the interest of justice and compassion, the president simply passed the buck. This week, the families of the 37 miners killed at Marikana filed a civil case against the Minister of Police claiming compensation for the loss of their loved ones. They've been forced to do so out of necessity. Those men who died on that day were not only miners, they were breadwinners, they were caregivers. Those 37 miners supported 326 dependents between them. They were striking for a living wage to support their extended families in the Northwest, in the Eastern Cape, in Gauteng, Lesotho and Swaziland. Their families are now approaching the courts to have their lifeline that was cut off from them 3 years ago restored. They're not making excessive demands. They're simply asking for compensation for the direct loss they suffered in August 2012, including the loss of financial support, expenses related to trauma counseling, and the loss of family life. Essentially, all they're asking the court to do is to put value on the life of a miner. But those miners were worth more than the income that served as a lifeline to their families. They were fellow human beings with dreams and aspirations who worked and lived in often unbearable conditions because they cared for their loved ones. They died for their dignity, and so they cared about would have been opportunities that many of them did not have. There's something fundamentally wrong with the system that now leaves these families at the mercy of the legal process, which could take years to conclude simply to put food on the table. The irony behind all of this is that the Marikana inquiry cost 153 million rands to reach a set of conclusions that didn't certainly allow for the president to bring justice, closure, or compensation. Including the fact that the security guards and the police officers that died during the process, this amounts to 3.5 million rands per life lost. The DA remains committed to ensuring that the lives of those who died are not devalued and that their families of victims in Marikana are compensated for this particular loss. The DA is in the process of investigating legislative options to ensure that the state takes responsibility for their actions. Whether it's through an order of the court or a result of a legislation passed in this house, this government must pay for what took place at Marikana that day. Honorable members, as we reflect on the Marikana massacre, we must ask ourselves what has happened to the sense of common humanity which we had when we entered into our democratic era in 1994. It is a country that was once a torchbearer of freedom and equality, and it should be necessary for the families of victims who died a brutal death at the hands of the state to have to fight to be able to survive. It should not be necessary for them to go to court to ask the Minister of Police at back then, Natim Tetwa, to apologize for the massacre. The Marikana report shows the extent to which members of the executive use their influence to protect the interest of mine owners at the cost of the lives of the miners that day. President Jacob Zuma has failed in his duty to hold the executive to account for Marikana. Instead, he's attempting to lead the public that the commission found that the executive played no role in the decision of the police to implement the tactical option on the 16th of August in 2012. Let me correct that. The truth is that the commission went to great lengths to emphasize that as a result of evasive and unhelpful testimony, specifically from the National Police Commissioner Ria Piecha, it was unable to find favorably in favor of Minister Mthethwa. It remains inconceivable that the decision to implement the tactical operations on the 16th of August were made without Minister Mthethwa's knowledge. It would seem he's also the same. He's Minister Angazi. He doesn't know what happened. But instead, to order 4,000 additional rounds of R5 ammunition for delivery at Marikana, as well as the request for 4 mortuary wagons at the scene, shows that the SAPs had no intention of being accused of bringing a knife to a gunfight. It was rather the miners who unmistakably made that fatal mistake. We may never know the full truth behind the chain of events that ended with the death of 34 miners on the 16th of August, but it was clear, and it's a conscious decision, that the loss of life was both likely and an acceptable outcome. So, honorable members, regardless of the financial value of the miner, to those involved in making the decision that led to them to their death, their lives were worthless. The miners were deemed expendable if it meant bringing an end to the strike. This is the real crime. President Zuma's government does not value the lives of all South Africans equally. They're interested in protecting their own at expense at protecting the Constitution. Marikana was not an aberration. It was a symptom of the sickness that President Jacob Zuma has inflicted on his government. The events that led to the deaths of Marikana did not happen in isolation, but in the context of a greater socio-political condition South Africa finds itself in. In remembering Marikana, we must not only direct our anger solely at the SEPs, but also at the greater failure of this government to deliver a fairer society with greater access to economic opportunities. In 1994, South Africans made a collective decision to embrace a democratic government in a hope that it will be able to rectify the injustices of the past. What is tragically sad is that it's the same injustices that remain today. Negile ko Marikana. Ka kopana le lelapa la mme o latlhegetsweng ka lelapa le. O mboleletse ka tsela sokolang ka teng ebile a sena le madi a go itlhokomela. Ya gage kgang ga se ene fela. Ke bontsi ba ba nnang ko Marikana ba ba santsane ba bona go ditšhono tsa bone di fedile. Society ya rona ga jeko is still divided on economic inequality, and still many are denied access to opportunities that others take for granted. You see, honorable members, we have a dream that says that we want to build a South Africa that is built on freedom, fairness, and opportunities, that opens up opportunities for South Africans to be participants in this economy. Yesterday, Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa stood here and simply said, if there's a government that cares about job creation, it is President Jacob Zuma's government. Where are the jobs? Why are the people not being able to find work? Instead, the president came here and said he didn't even know that Glencore's mining license was being removed. Honorable members, we cannot defend the executive while South Africans are living in a manner that is suffering. This government must take responsibility for its actions if we are going to ensure that the events in Marikana never reoccur. The DA believes that the purpose of government should not be enable to South Africans to use their freedoms to pursue a life their way.
Honorable member, your time has expired.
The best way to honor the lives of Marikana
Honorable leader of the opposition, your time has expired.
Thank you very much.